I got into the habit of walking around the farm by myself when the rain was light. I'd find a quiet place and just stand there listening to the patter of drops on the leaves and ground. I closed my eyes to see what else I could hear. I practiced forgetting what was beyond me and noticing only where I was. I practiced being wet and cold and hungry and not minding. Sometimes I took Jack with me, along with a field guide from the closet that we consulted through plastic. We learned the names of the trees and bushes and looked up their histories. We learned which had grown here in the time of the Indians and which had been brought from far away. Maples from Norway, mulberries from Asia, Siberian elm, a tree from China called the Empress. Greetings, everyone. Greetings. It is morning time, and I have my morning coffee, still drinking the Ethiopian bean from Counterculture, Ergachefe, Ethiopia. The bean is called Edido. Counterculture is one of the front runners of the specialty coffee movement. They've been doing it for years and years, and they do a fantastic job. They also happen to be located a couple hours up the road from me, so we have a lot of supply. I can be termed what is affectionately known as a coffee snob. I humbly accept the title. But this is just good. I mean, this is good. The notes. You got to think of the journey the bean takes before it lands in your hands and you are going to attempt to brew it. I mean, it goes through a lot before it gets there. All this dedication and craftsmanship culminating in an amateur brewing. It's a lot of responsibility, which kind of segues into reading. An author pours themselves out. They do research. They sit down and punch out a novel, and then they rewrite it, and they get help with editors, and then they rewrite huge portions. Some people, Avi, who writes children's books and has only won the Newbery Medal one time, though he has been honored many, he's only won it once. I heard him say in an interview he rewrites his books 50 to 60 times. Golly. So, yes, to the point, an author pours themselves out for a book, and then it lands at your library or at your bookshop, and you find it in your hands. You give it the dignity that it's worth and begin to turn those pages and read those words and follow through those chapters. All that work, is it worth it? Sometimes it is striking gold, and sometimes it's not worth it. God, when you think about the resource, the time, the energy that goes into writing a novel that ends up not being worth it, oof. Man, it is early. Today, I am reviewing for you another National Book Award finalist. One of the 5 finalists on the National Book Award, which will be announced in November. The winner of the book this year. It's a children's Bible, a novel by Lydia Millet, a former Pulitzer Prize finalist as well. So you know we're dealing with a hard hitter. She has 12 works of fiction out. This is the most recent, a children's Bible by Lydia Millet. I'm ready to jump in, talk about this book. I hope you're ready to follow along with the antics of Zim. Because we're going to zim-zam right through this. You know what I mean? We are going to Zimothy our way through this review. A children's Bible by Lydia Millet. That's what we're talking about today. Beautiful cover. I really like the cover. You've got some cute little forest animals here on the cover. And then they're kind of like standing on the edge of this like fire that's coming, it looks like. Somewhat apocalyptic, but counterbalanced with these cute animals. Story of my life. Am I right? Lydia. Lyd, what'd you do for us? Here we have 224 pages of kind of what would be termed a dystopian, pre-climate, apocalyptic, pre-climate apocalypse dystopian, pre-climate apocalypse dystopian teenage fiction. That's what a children's Bible can be termed. Other people have said a visionary sensibility. If anyone knows what the heck that means, please tell me. That was the LA Times. Lydia Millet is a stone cold genius. Jenny Awful. I don't know if that's how you pronounce that name. Karen Russell says, a writer without limits. Her writing is always flawlessly beautiful, reaching for an experience that precedes language itself. That's nice. That's high praise. Reaching for an experience that precedes language itself. But to say her writing is always flawlessly beautiful, I mean, then why is she like your favorite author? Always flawlessly beautiful? Look at this. Check this out. What? That's precarious. That is flawlessly precarious and beautiful. So we're talking about a children's Bible, a novel by Lydia Millet, finalist for the National Book Award in the year, yes, the year 2020, the year of the COVID dragon. Okay? So I hope you guys out there are staying safe, staying masked up, not listening to like any of your presidents if you're in America, and, you know, living the dream. Living the dream. Let's get started. So, a children's Bible. Can it be dystopian if it's pre-apocalypse? I think it can. Lydia Millet in a children's Bible gives us the story. We're in first-person narrative. The character that is narrating is named Eve, and we land in a summer vacation home with Eve and a handful of other children, teenagers, some younger than that, some siblings, and their parents, and they're in this mansion, basically, just this big, beautiful house near the ocean, and they're vacationing there for the summer. So everyone's there for the summer, and you have all these teenagers that are just kind of, we get the impression that they are becoming acquainted with each other throughout the story, and that they maybe have just met when this idea came about. Now, their parents are hedonistic crazies. They're in this house. All they are doing is drinking and doing drugs and having sex, and they are there to indulge their hedonistic pleasures, and the children, rightfully so, are disgusted by their parents' behavior, and you'll understand as you read the book why. So you have these hedonistic adults that are just despondent and indifferent and apathetic, and then you have these young people who are disgusted by them and a little bit more mature, composed. You have this inverted parent-child dynamic, groups of parents, groups of children, and the inverse. And so what she gives us in the plot, or in the development of this novel, or the infrastructure of this novel, it's not really the infrastructure, it's the writing, the story, what she gives us in the story. See how long it takes me to get to the word story? It should be so easy to just be like, what she gives us in the story. I'm like, what she gives us in the plot, the framework, the infrastructure, the architecture, the dynamics, story. What she gives us in the story. Tell us an infrastructure, Grandpa. What she gives us in the story is this dichotomous picture of hedonistic, apathetic adulthood and children who have to really live with the consequences of that hedonism, of that lack of willingness to act and fight and seek to change. They're living in a time where it is sure that the effects of climate change cannot be reversed. We actually see the inner thoughts of Eve, the narrator, as she kind of articulates how she had to break the news to her younger 9-year-old brother named Jack, how she had to break the news to him that we're not going to live to old age. We don't necessarily see that conversation play out, but we see those inner thoughts, and you feel the tragic nature of that she had to break the news to this sensitive, sweet character named Jack, who is kind of the thread throughout the novel of innocence and sensitivity and care and sacrifice in a lot of ways. And then a huge hurricane comes. And when the hurricane hits, there's all this chaos. The mansion has all this damage to it. The parents are like getting drunk in the midst of this massive storm hitting. You see just like this picture, this natural disaster imagery, and the apathy and the disconnect and the like groping after the last bit of pleasure that one can milk out of the moment in order to escape. It's escapism that we see, and the children kind of take the reins in keeping things going. Now, after the storm hits, the children meet this man named Burl, and they leave. They decide to leave the parents, and they end up going to this other location, and the parents are again apathetic. That sets the stage for what a children's Bible is about. We then have this dynamic in the book that is a little bit hard to pinpoint. Throughout the book, we see Lydia Millet use biblical imagery very liberally. Like, there's a lot of biblical imagery in the book, almost to the degree that you start to wonder, is this meant to be allegorical in some form or fashion? I'm not talking like small images here that just like remind you of biblical events or biblical stories or whatever. I'm talking like whole sections that are like is this like that are just very close. Like, there's even a section where one guy is strung up and his arms are like strung up, and it just like comes across as like this crucifixion scene in a way. It eluded me what the purpose of all this imagery was. I wasn't grasping what Lydia Millet was trying to do in using that imagery. I'm still like not understanding why there was so much pinpoint, like focused biblical imagery, almost to the degree that it felt at times borderline allegorical. But then it stepped in and out of that so much, because an allegory, a true allegory, would be every single action, behavior, setting, event can be mapped to what this is allegorically representing, in this case the Bible. But that's not the case. You don't have every single event, so it's not allegorical. It's not maybe it's symbolism, maybe it's biblical symbolism, but it's very obvious at times that this is like meant to be something biblical. And it eluded me. I think what we have is a very interesting setup, a very interesting concept to explore in how the apathy of an older generation that knows they're heading for doom and just pursuing as much pleasure and hedonistic desire as possible before they die, and they're living in denial and can't accept the fact that this is the end. Let's get a mansion for the summer and just drink and do lines of cocaine and get drunk every night and dance with each other, and then let's take some ecstasy. Like, they're just wild. They're wild. So it's interesting to examine, how does the imminent end of the world impact individuals? And we kind of get that. And then how does the end of the world impact children that have to come to terms with the imminent ending at such a young age? And then how does it impact the teenage psyche in terms of having to grapple with that as well, and then feeling the responsibility for some of them, like the narrator, to your younger siblings and all of that. Very, very interesting concepts to explore, in my opinion. There's a lot there. There's a lot to look at. There's a lot of human psychology, human experience, human suffering, human fear, human triumph and hope, human relationship. There's so much to explore there. I think Lydia Millet does some good excavation of that subject matter. I also think that it was super confusing. There's a lot of confusing stuff with the biblical imagery. I don't know what she was saying with it. I have no idea what she was getting at. At the same time, while there's all this allegorical or symbolic or biblical imagery throughout, we also have Jack gets a hold of a children's Bible, and he starts, like, when the storm is coming, he's gathering up the animals like Noah. So there's the very thing that you're kind of symbolizing is also present in the story, which feels even more confusing. Lydia Millet, she's a very good writer. There's moments where explanations or these stories or these memories or whatever, she builds them up, and then she in a last moment kind of cuts through you or devastates you or invites you into triumph. So there's some really beautiful moments in Lydia Millet's writing like that. But I think that there's also a lot of confusion in this novel. You're like, what is going on? Why is this here? And then there's a moment where this woman shows up in a helicopter that's like also got superpowers. Like, not like overt superhero superpowers, but she's like, she knows everybody's names without being introduced, and she knows things about them, and then she heals some guy's leg. Like, that part was super confusing, because you're like, okay, is this imagery? But it's not just imagery. Like, she really healed that person's leg? What? It didn't like make it a bad book, having explored those human elements of apathy and hedonism, and again, the imminent end of the world, and how modern day people in a modern day setting might experience that. That was interesting. Good premise, good concept. The relationship between Eve, the narrator, and her brother Jack, her motherly role that she adopts at a young age, and Jack and his sensitivity, Jack and his care for animals, Jack and his care for the earth, Jack and his care for other people, even people that are trying to hurt them. This little 9-year-old is a beautiful character. As far as character development goes, though, Lydia Millet doesn't even really attempt to explore characters. She doesn't build deep, robust, dimensional characters, and she's not attempting to. It's not that she attempted to and failed, it's that she didn't go that way with the novel. So, do I think that this book should win the National Book Award in 2020? I don't think I want it to win. It's too confusing. It doesn't do enough for me. It doesn't really offer me much except for those elements I've already discussed, of those dichotomies that we see, and some of those beautiful moments of humanity that she really crafts for us, that we watch her build and then use to kind of devastate us or poetically uncover us. There's too many elements that you walk away thinking, why was that in there? And upon further reflection, you don't come to any conclusion. And to me, that's an issue. An indelible novel of teenage alienation and adult complacency in an unraveling world. That is true. That's true. And in fact, you know what? That's what I would have hoped for. That's what I would have wanted this story to be. my first impression should be, whoa, look what she was doing with all this imagery. There was purpose behind it, and it mattered to the story, to the book. That's why this book exists. But I didn't get that. I didn't get that with this Lydia Millet. I didn't get that, and I really wanted to. Here's what I wish would have happened. Here's what I think would have been something special. I think if this would have just simply been an indelible novel of teenage alienation and adult complacency in an unraveling world, if she would have plumbed the depths of that, the adult complacency, the teenage alienation through the experience of Eve, and we go deep into what Eve is experiencing, Eve's fears, Eve's humanity, Eve's hopes, Eve's triumphs, all those things, Eve's relationships, the unraveling of the world around her, all of that, like really focused on, really crafted and architected with character development that leaves an impression that really does prove this novel to be indelible. If that would have been what materialized here in a children's Bible, I think we would have had a more powerful, substantial novel that was a hard hitter and heavyweight champion of the National Book Award this year. But we had all this confusing imagery, and we had these shallowly developed characters, albeit on purpose, and we had these concepts that were explored to a degree, but also not explored through enough of a filter of humanity for it to matter deeply. That's what I think of a children's Bible by Lydia Millet. Go check it out. It's a quick enough read that you could check it out and come away with your own thoughts about it, and come back and leave those in the comments. I'd love to know what you guys thought of this book if you've read it. An indelible novel of teenage alienation and adult complacency in an unraveling world. Join Eve as she ventures across the northern back roads of New York, post-hurricane, pre-climate apocalypse, with her younger brother Jack, in a cage with a possum, a fox, and a beehive, as they seek to establish themselves in a dying world with a bunch of biblical imagery and a bunch of confusing biblical imagery at that. A children's Bible by Lydia Millet, National Book Award finalist in the year of our Lord 2020, the year of the COVID dragon.